My name is David von Ehrlicher, and I have been involved with Chicago dance over 15, almost 20 years now. So I don't know if we should start in the beginning or just where should we go? Okay. One of my first castings was with the Ruth Page Nutcracker. Now this was back when Ruth Page was still alive, and they were still performing at the Erie Crown Theater. So that's quite a while ago. Afterwards, I got involved with this James Hedges Choir, which was an extension of the Chicago Children's Choir, and that eventually led to the CMA Choir, so that was a sort of a double path there. Anyway, afterwards, the Chicago Tribune had pulled out of the Ruth Page Nutcracker, so that had ended. So that's why I went through this singing route for a while. But by pure chance, Larry Long had brought it back, a smaller, condensed version, and I happened to see it. And that's when I got involved with Rodney Irwin. He was one of my first teachers as an more mature person. I had only trained with him 6 months, and one of the girls from his class was working with August Hyde down in Hyde Park. So I ended up getting cast with their Nutcracker immediately afterwards. Everything kind of overlapped into the next thing. Well, for those who don't, Amy and August Hyde have been running the Hyde Park studio for several years, which was an outreach of some of the board members who were with Maria Talltree back when she worked with the Chicago Opera and Chicago Ballet. But different factions broke into different areas. Anyway, I worked with them on their Taigo Dance project. That is the original Taigo Dance, but there were successive generations afterwards, but that was the first. I was part of the first group of that. And one of the people I partnered was a woman named Katie McCain, who's now in charge of the Dance in the Parks. So I don't know if you've met her, but she's around. She's been around for a while. From there, one of her cast members was working with the Chicago Festival Ballet, and that's how I ended up getting in touch with Ken von Heidecke, and I started touring with the Chicago Festival Ballet after that. Now, of course, this was back when Maria Talltree was still alive, and she used to go with them and give little lectures about the school. From there, what happened next? Oh, from there, I was in a dinner party, and I ran into the parents of a person who used to dance back with my family a generation back, because I got a whole 4 generations, which I could talk about, of Chicago dance, but I don't know how much time we have. Anyway, they were involved with musicals on the south side of Chicago, and that was with Diana Tarandy and Tommy Fagan, and they have the Beverly Theater Guild, and I did a whole pile of musicals on the south side of Chicago, and I still got to get you in touch with Diana Tarandy. I told you that before. From there, went out. I ended up running back into Amy Tai, sister of August Tai, and she was up at Joe Hall. I went back up to Joe Hall, met Paul Sanasardo, and that started to change things, because now by this point I had already been dancing, touring professionally, getting paid, but then I met Paul, and I thought, okay, now we're getting to a whole different level. And what Paul was wonderful about, he's a great mentor for older age. Because I had already been doing things, but I had finally gotten to levels like, am I going to get any better? Is this it? And I thought, no, you can still reach a higher plateau. And Amy Tai, who's old enough to be my mother, was starting to train with him, and even she got to a better place. It just so happened that August was she became the ballet mistress at the Lyric Opera at the same time, so I got a part doing the Harlequin for a masked ball, which of course led to successive jobs, the maitre d' for the Hansel and Gretel and a couple other character parts through that. Then, because I had been working with Paul, he started encouraging the dancers he was working with to start making their own ballets, and that's how I started making my own ballets. I made my Last Messenger, which was wonderful because I cast Amy Tai in it, who's the sister of August Tai, but Amy Tai had actually been one of my teachers once upon a time, so everything came around full circle. So that's sort of a general place of where I've been at. And then I also met right next to the Ruth Page studio. Oh, by the way, when I was with the Chicago Festival Ballet, Victor Alexander was there with them. So now I think he went under a different surname then, I'm not sure, but now he's the director of the Ruth Page Center. right next door they have Paladin Chisel, which I ended up running into the chairman of the board for the Dance Academy on Michigan Avenue. But anyway, I started working with them too. That's a general idea. Where should we go from here? American Academy of Art, that's what it was. American Academy of Art, that's what it was. Yes. Yes. Yes, they do. Sure. Well, here's the thing. I'm the only one who kept doing it. So all my generations before me, they kind of touched base with Chicago dance and performance, but I was the only one who kept going. So if I go back to my great-grandfather, his name was Wolfgang Zauner. He was part of the whole German background, but he went under the stage name Bill Zauner, and he was only involved in vaudeville. And he was here in Chicago, and he was a magician. And supposedly he was friends with Frank Morgan, and he was also friends with I forgot the guy who had the Charlie McCarthy doll. Bert Durgan. Anyway, he was friends with him, and he was also friends with the guy who made the doll. So after the Charlie McCarthy went on his own path, my great-grandfather, Bill Zauner, wanted an exact duplicate of that doll, and because he knew the craftsman who made it, he had an exact duplicate of the Charlie McCarthy doll for his own acts, because he was also a puppeteer. He was all over the place, my great-grandfather, Bill Zauner. Well, his daughter, my grandmother, Marie, she started doing little local dances, but, you know, life gets in the way, you get married and stuff. But what she ended up getting into was vaudeville, but like vaudeville show dancing. Now, this is a whole movement in Chicago that people don't know, that vaudeville sort of survived only on the south side within a little Irish community of Beverly community and the Oak Lawn theaters. There's these little Irish communities that are clinging on to vaudeville and musicals, and that's why I have to get you in touch with Diana Taurasi. You'll have a lot of fun with them. She stayed involved with that for many years, and all her kids got involved with that. But I don't know what Diana Taurasi's connection was with the Ruth Page, because she started sending a lot of her kids up to Ruth Page. So a whole pile of my uncles ended up dancing at the Ruth Page Center with Edna McCrae and Miss Lowe, who kind of took over after Edna McCrae. So they went through a whole pile from the first show, 1965, up until right when they closed, which was me. So that's sort of that whole generational thing. But most of them, once they got to a certain age, they sort of drifted out of it. I'm the only one who's still doing it. But like Larry Long said, I think the hardest thing to do is to keep people inspired. You know, it's not just a job or a career. It sort of becomes a way of life if you really fall in love with it. So. Oh, sure. Sure. I can't tell you too much about Larry. I didn't train with him that much because I was too young and I hadn't been strong enough yet. But I always watched him from the doorway. And it was one of those things where you're just afraid to go near it. You just kind of quake in your knees. But I used to watch him in the big studio at Ruth Page from the doorway. And then one day, I thought I got bold enough to actually, I'm going to take one class. I'm just going to hell with it. I'm going to do it. I walked in there, and of course he spotted me out right away. And he called me in front of the class and said, "You don't belong here. You can take today's class, but you don't belong here." I thought, all right, but he's letting me do it. I took it. It was admittingly very hard. I hadn't built up my technique and stamina that far yet, but I made it to the end of it. I thought, okay, I'll build up a little further. So after that, I started circling around, I started performing, and I thought, I finally got it. Within a couple of years, I thought, I'm good enough, you know, I'm going to go back to Larry Long. I'm strong now. Just when I go back, he got hit by a car. And strangely enough, I went to his memorial, and without knowing it, Paul Sanasardo was there too. But we didn't know we were going to end up working together until about a year later when we actually started working up at Joe Hall, because he was using the studio then. My work or getting into dance? Oh, all right. Getting into dance. it was very frustrating as a child because your mobility is very limited. So, and plus, when Tribune pulled out of Ruth Page, I thought, the world ended, and for a child, Nutcracker is the beginning and the end of everything. And I had started experimenting with singing a little bit. However, years later, I heard through the grapevine that Larry was trying to start the Ruth Page again. And I saw it, and strangely enough, it was a very small, reduced version of it, and it was still inspiring. And what almost moved me was the Harlequin scene, the two dance scenes in the party scene of the Nutcracker, the Harlequin and Columbine, and then the two soldiers that dance. And I thought, the choreography was still beautiful. It was still pulling me back in, and that's when I got in touch with Rodney Irwin. And within 6 months, I started working with August High down south. Fast forward about 10 years, I started working with Paul, who started saying, maybe you should start making your own dances. That's when I thought, well, what inspires me, and butterfly. What inspires me? Well, I'm in the car driving, and I'm thinking, I really would like to make my own dance. I'm driving, and all of a sudden this new piece comes on the radio. It was called Taigu Rhymes, and it had just premiered, and it was going to premiere at Millenium Park. And I thought, I love this piece of music. I have to sink my teeth into it. And I couldn't get it because it was a new piece. Well, I finally figured out a way to get it. I called Paul and said, we got to go to Millenium Park and hear this new piece of music. We both came here, he listened, he thought, that's a worthwhile piece of music called Taigu Rhymes by Zo Lang. After that, I finally was able to get a recording of that piece of music, and I just started working on it. Originally, it was just supposed to be a solo, but Paul was still working with a couple other girls that were in very good shape, and it just so happened that August High, once again, because our lives keep crisscrossing out of each other's lives, was having her 20th anniversary for her studio, and she had hired some Joffrey dancers to come in. What's his name? Oh, I'll remember it. Anyway, we went there, and I thought, well, what a perfect venue just to actually do this, because we had the Logan Center down by the University of Chicago. Paul and I had already been teaching some lecture demonstrations at the University of Chicago. We had also been up at New Trier. So I thought, there's enough here, and I have enough people I can keep, some of these girls interested in. They were in the right place. Well, I drilled the girls to death. They would be red in the face. I'm not easy. I know I look like a child, but I'm not the easiest person to work with. And of course, I really wanted Amy Tai because she had the right spirituality for one part that I was making. So then it turned into a trio, and I really felt it came off with a really good success. Stopped the show. Everyone liked it. I thought, no, I can do this. I can do more of this. And I started making some little ballets here and there, depending on the venue since then. So there we go. What can I say? What could I say? I need a question to work from.
I've been asking everybody this. What, if anything, do you think makes Chicago dance here in Chicago?
That makes it unique?
Yeah.
There's a lot of cross-pollination. I could say a lot of the people I started out with, we've been zigging and zagging out of each other's lives for a long, long time. I mean, you have to remember, I started out with August when her school was still small, so I kind of grew with her. And like I said, I was actually partnering Katie McCain before she went off and started the Dance in the Parks project. Now, Joe Hall's been around forever. He's in his 70s. Paul's probably the oldest person left in Chicago. He's 90 now. I still appreciate working with because he still works with people, but he's still of that very, very old school mentality. He chooses who he wants to work with, and that's it. So you're either in the bag or you're not. Other people you think disappear for a while, and one of them was like when I was touring with the Chicago Festival Ballet. One of them was Victor Alexander. I remember him. But our ways parted for a real long time until one day I got caught in the rain because I was going from the Newberry, which I happened to do research at, over up to Lincoln Park. I got caught in the rain and I ran into the Ruth Page Center, and there's Victor. I'm like, wait a minute, I know you. And it's like, he's the director there now. So, everyone has to find their own way, but, we all start off from certain kernels of pockets, and sometimes some of the pockets dissolved, and sometimes new things started. Sometimes there was a wave. It's hard to say. It's an ever-changing field. It's very fickle, unfortunately.